Good evening, friends. Welcome to another WordofGord. Continuing on with this remarkable early book of projection experiences by Frederck Sculthorp, Excursions into the Spirit World. And I hope you're as enthralled by it as I am. It certainly is a precise rendition of his experiences. There's no question about that. And we'll just move right into where we were last night, meeting my higher self. In my early projections, I used to be taken to lectures, but I could never bring the subject matter back to my physical mind like other experiences. I was told that the lectures were to do with the higher knowledge and corresponding wavelength of spirit, and could not be understood or held by the slower physical mind. I can well accept this, as for instance, no spirit has ever explained in earthly terms why or how prediction is possible. Some very good points there. I've certainly been in classroom lecture situations myself, and I don't remember much of the detail of what has gone on. And I've always told myself that it's not really necessary for me to remember in detail. It's merely important for me to acknowledge the fact that it happened at all. But I could be, in a bit of denial there and being a little lazy for not trying harder to recall. I'll leave the assessment of that up to you. What is learnt at the lectures is retained by the spirit mind, because when I entered the lecture room, I used to have a flashback of previous lectures. The remarkable thing about this spirit memory is that the lectures were remembered in sequence, yet the thought was instantaneous. That is the speed of spirit mind. No wonder I only had hazy recollections when I returned. An amusing thing happened at my first lecture. It was a small hall with blue plush seats arranged in circular formation. As a new boy, I felt a certain reserve and chose an outer seat, but I had no sooner sat down than I was wafted upwards and deposited in a front seat. The later lectures I attended were more like the usual classrooms at school, and at one of these sessions I happened to glance at what I thought was another student beside me, when I found that I was looking at myself. I was quite interested until I realized that I was admiring myself. Then two bodies at once, they reunited. How's that for instant vanity karma? A few weeks later, the same thing happened in the lecture room, but this time the teachers were fully prepared and my two spirit bodies were kept separated, and I was made to observe fully my other spirit self. I appeared to be a very healthy-looking young man of about 23, with a full head of hair, which in the physical body I lack. This meeting one's higher self is a very curious phenomenon, with far-reaching implications. I have heard of other persons who have experiences of astral projections and while in spirit have met a separate double of themselves. This shows that the spiritual being of man is also a complicated structure. The main building has several lecture rooms, and once, when passing the open door of one, I recognized the lecturer. He was my company officer in the army in 1914, and I was pleased to see that his physical appearance denoted a progressed state. He evidently received my thoughts, for he turned and smiled towards me. Wonderful things are demonstrated by some of the advanced ones. I brought back a few recollections of a meeting or lecture I once attended, and I noticed that my father was in the audience with me. We were shown a map of the sea from Spain to the Gulf of Mexico, but I could not retain what was said about it. Then there appeared a series of events like stereoscopic cinema film, and I remember seeing a number of strangely dressed horsemen who were suddenly overwhelmed by a tremendous wall of water like a tidal wave. When I returned to my bed, I could not remember more, but I thought it was connected with some great upheaval like the Atlantis legend. This may have been my own surmise, as I had not seen the map. Had I not seen the map, I might have associated it with the biblical flight from Egypt. My first actual meeting with my wife in my fourth projection, which I related earlier in the book, was one of two outstanding experiences which have deeply imprinted upon my mind. The indescribable spiritual perfection that I now saw in my wife when we were face to face, the sacred intensity of the high vibration, and the later explanation of God's image caused me a great deal of quiet thought for days afterwards. I somehow knew that it was one of the eternal and unfailing spirit laws that it was simple and natural. I also knew that I would be helped by my spirit teachers in my meditations, and this was so, for gradually the simple truth came to me. When I met my wife and our auras intermingled, there was a beautiful and gentle harmony, and we both thought alike and as one mind, so I am able to relate what we both thought. In that wonderful meeting, there were no thoughts of self. Each thought of the welfare of the other, and each saw that all was well. Each mind gave a blessing for the privilege of having had the loving companionship of the other on earth. Each mind was full of the wonder of the meeting, then a heartfelt thankfulness for the loving power that made all this possible. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy mind. We did just this and really meant it. Then came the transformation. Naturally and knowingly, we had opened ourselves to that power which is always around. And with the power came the high vibration of spirit. God's image I can only describe as perfection. Yet we are not stereotyped. All the best personal features are beautified and enhanced in some wonderful way and retained so that we are known and recognized, and the personal wavelength makes each a unique unit. In our subsequent meetings, my wife appears young and has the finely formed features of spirit, but I have not seen her since in that sacred perfection that our fervent thankfulness brought about. I believe that state of being is many planes ahead. My longest contact with an animal in spirit was with a horse, and I consider the occasion one of my great privileges. I had been projected, and my consciousness of the time on arrival was very gradual, and I became aware that I was firmly seated on a horse. My spirit body sensed the vibration of the place. It seemed to be perfect and beautiful. Then I noticed that there were many people walking about. They all wore colored robes and looked severe and graceful and really quite serene. The robes worn on a higher plane do not look out of place when seen from the same plane, and one does not even think of earthly clothes. Yes, lots of talk of robes in the old spiritualism. I don't see people talking about it very much now in channeled mediumistic stuff, but in stuff from 100 to 50 years ago, a lot of talk about robes. I kept making jokes about toga parties, to myself anyway. I sensed that a ceremony had just concluded, and that they were mingling and greeting one another before leaving. The vibration of sincere friendship and love was so perfectly in tune that they seemed to be of one mind, and each was a separate unit. A lovely personality whose presence was greatly desired by every other unit. This is the real meaning of company. It takes several souls to make company, yet where is the company when there is a division? This is the spirit version of brotherhood. The vibration of this place held me and had a very remarkable effect. There were hundreds of people here. Hundreds of people whose faces I'd never seen before, and yet I could not see a stranger. We all knew one another. I cannot attempt to explain this. Soon I thought, or was impressed, that it was time to be moving, and glanced down at the horse, which seemed to be waiting expectantly. Retaining that during the wait it had not fidgeted in the slightest, I felt very well pleased with it. There was an instant response, and I felt an answering warmth of affection which seemed to contain happiness, friendship, and willingness. And I knew it was the reciprocation of the thoughts as our auras were mingling. I saw my chance to leave through a lane in the assembly, but my friend the horse started to move before I could give any outward indication that I wished to go forward, as by that same interchange of thought it knew my dreams. And so it was, through a clearing on a long path to the bright countryside. This lovely animal anticipated my every wish, and the reins were simply provided for my earthly habit of thought, as even when loosely held, they are reassuring. I sensed that this horse had been long in spirit and was used to love and kindness in the thoughts of the people of this plain. To describe a ride on a spirit horse seems to call for some swift Pegasus-like ride, but it was not to be. Oh dear. That was not good. Apologies for that. Slipped right out of my hand. The vibration of sincere friendship and love was so perfectly in tune that they seemed to be of one mind, yet each was a separate unit, a lovely personality whose presence was greatly desired by every other unit. This is the real meaning of company. It takes several souls to make company, yet where is company when there is division? This is the spirit version of brotherhood. I saw my chance to leave through a lane in the assembly, but my friend the horse started to move before I could give any outward indication that I wished to go forward, as by that same interchange of thought it knew my desires. And so it was, through a clearing onto a long path through the bright countryside, this lovely animal anticipated my every wish, and the reins were simply provided for my earthly habit of thought, as even when loosely held they are reassuring. I sensed that this horse had been long in spirit and was used to the love and kindness in the thoughts of the people of the plain. To describe a ride in a spirit horse seems to call for some swift Pegasus-like ride, but it was not so. Although there is no fatigue in spirit, we were on holiday, and we had all time in this timeless state. We simply walked, and I did not wish for anything better. Sometimes I would be attracted by the beauty of a scene, and, my desire being known, the horse would halt and give a half turn so that I could dwell on it and then on again. We seemed to be of one mind. The happiness this apparently simple ride gave me is hard to describe. Every time my thoughts strayed to the horse, there would be an answering thought, which was in utter love for humans. I could not detect the slightest trace of, quote, subjection by mastery, end quote. Considering the lives of some horses on earth and their treatment, which I have seen in many different countries, perhaps part of my pleasure was in knowing that such simple bliss could be reached by an animal, and that this was another of God's perfect laws. Well, we've commented on that before. We went a considerable distance, turned and meandered pleasantly back. Nearing the end of the ride, I began to have that drowsiness that happens to me when being on a high vibration, and drifted back to the physical body. This was a single excursion to one plane, and it happened at night. Although none of my spirit travels affected my rest at night, this experience refreshed me bodily as if I had been on a holiday. At first the projections were from my bed at night, and later also on Sunday afternoons from an armchair upstairs. After this I found it possible to project when I had the time and ease. I simply used to ask and wait, but it did not always happen, and I had plenty of blank dates. On one occasion when nothing happened, I got impatient and tried to will myself out of the body, but without success, and I told nobody. Later, I was with a medium friend who suddenly looked down and asked me if I'd tried to project on my own. When I admitted it, I was sternly told never to try it again. Quote, "Your guides know the best time." Well, that would really put you in your place, wouldn't it? When I have projected, there always seems to be a spirit helper to watch over my physical body, who obviously knows what goes on in my home, as I have never been caught out. Should I be wanted for any reason, I would always be comfortably brought back, and then I would hear the footsteps of somebody in my house coming up to call me. There are other protections. The spirit body cannot be injured, but any discomfort in the physical body is communicated through the connecting astral cord and is registered in the same place on the spirit body. I have been brought back because the physical body was coughing, snoring, or had numbness or cramp. A loud noise will also get the being to return. There always seems to exist a natural protection for the inert physical body, but curious effects can sometimes be observed. Once I was walking along a street in spirit and began to emit strong, regular snores. It was very strange, but I could not stop it, and I became annoyed. This feeling brought me back to the body, the spirit law of a lower vibration, and I found myself lying on my back and snoring heartily through the effects of a cold. One night in bed, I had projected to a rest home in a hospital, on the other side, where I knew my wife was helping. And as I crossed a corridor to her room, I gave a choking cough, which at once waked me back. My physical body was still coughing when I re-entered it. On another occasion, I had left a factory in spirit and was walking outside when my legs suddenly crossed and locked. I had to bend down and force them apart. This happened several times, which caused the usual annoyance and the automatic return to the body. I had projected from an armchair and my legs were crossed and had become numb. Sometimes I'm aware of what is wrong with my physical body left behind on earth. I was once talking to a soldier in spirit in the astral plane, and I knew him, and I sensed that he did not realize his own true condition. As it is not always helpful to tell a person outright that he is dead, I was trying to make him recall his last years on earth. Suddenly, while I was talking, a very painful ache came into my right arm, and I knew that my physical body was pressing on the arm in bed. I tried to ignore it and went on speaking, but he suddenly said, "Oh, you are all fuzzy." Apparently my spirit body had become indistinct to him. The ache in my arm increased and the little girl appeared at my side. I put a hand on her shoulder, concentrated on the physical, and returned. I sat up in bed and rubbed at my right arm until it was normal. The little girl who appeared at my side seemed to be the same one who took me round the rest home in my second projection. On this occasion I saw a woman with a fuzzy-looking spirit body, and it is interesting to note that I probably resembled her. I have said that the spirit body cannot be injured. I did not experiment in this direction, but a demonstration was arranged by my spirit helpers. I was taken to a bright place and was talking to a group of young men whose ages appeared to be approximately between 25 and 23. The age usually assumed by those who have progressed in spirit. I didn't know it was that precisely defined, but then, I've been out of the loop a little while. Well, isn't that interesting? I did not experiment in this direction, but a demonstration was arranged. I was taken to a bright place and was talking to a group of young men whose ages appeared to be between 23 and 25. Their appearance is very fine. It is always a pleasure to be with them, as the emanation of their auras has a pleasant effect on my spirit body. Suddenly one of them plunged a knife into my hand. Wow. For a moment I was startled, then I laughed as there was no pain. One of the smiling group said, "Look at your hand." There was a hole in the palm, and it was slowly closing through no volition on my part. Similar stories in my own first book, Eternal Life and How to Enjoy It. I remember reading of a spirit guide explaining to a circle that a spirit is like electricity, only more subtle. This, I think, is very apt and should be borne in mind. Often when arriving on a plane, there seems to be, electrically speaking, a difference of potential between my astral body and the locality. Then upon touching an object, I become more in phase, and with that state and full awareness, it then occurs. The full awareness, that is, with a feeling of greater power and interest. For ages it has been known by those who study this subject that we have a physical and a spirit body, and that the latter might be conceived of as consisting of electrical forces arranged in a pattern. Every thought might be likened to an electrical impulse. Since the advent of sensitive electronic apparatus, the electrical changes connected with thought impulses have been recorded. We may think of every thought impulse as having a specific wavelength or a specific rate of vibration connected therewith, like waves in a radio. All through an individual's life, the electrical impulse of every thought is impressed on and held by the spirit body, just as a tape recorder retains an impression of electrical impulses. I suppose a few of you don't even remember what tape recorders are. Every thought has a specific rate of vibration. Every thought? I believe good thoughts have a high rate and the not so good a lower rate. These combined variations have an average of or mean value. The entry upon spirit life, when it happens, a person will naturally and automatically gravitate to a state in spirit, which corresponds to his acts and thoughts throughout his life, as reproduced by the personal tape record. This automatic attraction to the appropriate spirit surroundings represents another of the perfect spirit laws. Well, I wouldn't call them spirit laws. I would certainly agree that, especially when you're retrieving people or rescuing souls and moving them on upward through the planes, they do react strongly to the beauty of physical plane places. They do seem to know where they have to go. It's almost as if they have a radar connection with their comfort zone, their cultural comfort zone, or their religious comfort zone. And if you're retrieving a whole pile of people, 10, 15, whatever, they will, some of them will drop off as if you're going over their home state or home province. They'll actually just disappear from the crowd inside your aura. So there's definitely a sense that spirits almost automatically know which is the right level for them, or think they know anyway. This, the above description, it is also the answer to those who jokingly say it would need an unbelievable amount of celestial bookkeeping to register every intention, wish, thought, and act of everybody, to be brought up at some future judgment. The fact is that everybody is, knowingly or unknowingly, his very own accountant. The good and the bad acts represented by the higher and lower vibrations oscillating around the mean value also fix the upper and lower limits of the particular sphere in the spirit world to which the newcomer is attracted. His scope is then determined, and he cannot see into higher spheres any more than the average person on earth can look into the spirit world. Thus we have one spirit saying, "We eat as we did on earth," and another, "We do not need food." I have seen that both statements, though seemingly mutually conflicting, are true, but they belong to different spheres. You can bet people that have been hungry their whole physical lives and go to a supportive community when they pass. You can hardly imagine them keeping themselves from the free pens. Thus, we have one spirit saying, "We eat as we did on earth," and another, "We do not need food." I have seen that both statements, though seemingly mutually conflicting, are true, but they belong to different spheres. It's important to remember that. Things are different in different places, and not just culturally, energetically. The lower and intermediate states appear to be vast zones of vibration, split up like the radio bands into tendencies, habits, or desires of the inhabitants, and are as numerous as only the infinite variety of minds can be. These different states are varying degrees of brightness, from dull to lower to the higher and brighter, the latter resembling a bright sunny day on earth. Some of these pages stick together. Not as they would with glue, just I think with age, so excuse me while I fiddle with the pages. After I had been to the next planes of existence a good many times, I thought it odd that I'd never witnessed an accident of any kind. When the spirit body is or of near the same wavelength of a plane, all things seem solid and can be felt and handled. Yet I have never accidentally knocked against an object or person at any time. I could not experiment in this direction as mind would interfere and a planned accident would not be accidental. My teacher solved this problem for me by a carefully timed incident, as will be seen by the sequence of events that led up to it. I had been projected to a hospital in spirit where I knew my wife was working, but as I reached the entrance, a door was closed, and my invisible guide said, "The hospital is not open yet." I felt an impairment, an impatience, and as I'm always aware of the limited time of a projection, you can't really help that. And time was growing on them. Time was definitely growing short. I walked around the hospital gardens, which had banks of beautiful flowers, and was admiring a pretty white bridge over a stream when my guide said, "The hospital is open now." Quickly I ran to the hospital through the entrance and up some stairs. I'm always intrigued when he talks about running. I never feel the need to do that when I'm there. Flying, yes. Running, no. As I turned the corner, I ran headlong into a group of people coming down. There was no shock or collision. I felt as if I had hit a soft cushion of air and was diverted around the group. The group which continued on, but I stopped in surprise. I had, in an instant, contacted the minds of the group, and they were hospital workers going off duty. Simple enough, but I could not understand this strange happening. My teacher then impressed upon me, as far as I was able to understand, that the spirit body is electrical, and it is surrounded by a stone or field, like a magnetic field, which automatically repels. This repulsion is neutralized when the mind desires to touch or grasp. In the same unexpected way, I was taught quite a few things which I would not have learned otherwise. Well, there's still more to come from Mr. Frederick, and I hope you're taking it all in and pondering the strangeness of it all. I mean, he might as well be visiting friends down the street and talking about how, their new kitchen and basement looks. It's very straightforward. It's very neighborly. And he's made great efforts in this part of his journey. And certainly feel grateful for the level of detail that he recalls. It's quite remarkable. Most people, most other writers, other than me on an odd occasion and Jürgen Zhu almost all the time, have great memory of activities in spirit. And I guess it's important that we do so that we can communicate it in books and videos. And this chap isn't quite in that category. Although maybe he is, and I'm just not giving him enough credit. I'm sort of waffling here. It's getting on late, but it's endlessly interesting, is it not? And we've still got, a good 50-odd pages of this book to go. I mean, I may not read every last page, but there's definitely more interesting stuff. And thank you, Frederick. Very stimulating stuff. And you might wonder why it didn't stimulate me to stay a little more awake. Well, I don't blame you. Anyway, it's a nice intimate time of night to be doing such a discussion. And I hope you, well, of course you may be watching it at 7 in the morning before you go to work for all I know. Anyway, best wishes on all those lucid dream recalls. Ponder them, write them down, let them settle into your consciousness and bring about greater dimensional shifts in your daily life.